All right, we are recording for our demo on our sports action photography description. So again, I'll be describing the project in detail, showing you student examples, and then showing you how to set up a camera or your smartphone to shoot for this project. So for this project, you'll be taking 10 pictures of something or someone in fast motion and freezing the fast motion with a fast shutter speed. I'd recommend starting out with 1/1000th of a second or faster, depending on your subject. So certain subjects are moving super fast. You might want to go like 1/4000th of a second. Other ones are not as fast, so 1000 should freeze it pretty well. The key thing I'm looking for is you're able to control the shutter speed and to get something in motion and focus, which is kind of challenging. So what I'm looking for is the focus on the subject and if there's motion blur on the subject. So I'm sure you guys have seen motion blur before, where you got like, you know, someone moving real quick and then like their hands are blurring, or like the edges are kind of fuzzy from motion blur. That's what's happening. Basically the shutter, when it opens and exposes the sensor, then closes, it's so long that if something's moving fast, it captures that motion. So we want to freeze motion with this project. What I'm hoping for is to try to shoot with at least 3 different backgrounds in your photos. So I put 3 different locations. You could go to like one location. It could be your backyard or a park or a beach or whatever you want to shoot at. And you could shoot from different angles. So I just don't want to see 10 photos where it's like the same wall in all your photos. I want to see you try to shoot from some different angles. So if this is my backyard, and maybe shoot some photos facing north, shoot some facing east, and shoot some facing south. So that way I have kind of 3 different backgrounds around my subject. For this project, you can shoot anything. It could be a person in motion, like your friends or family, or it could be an object in motion, or it could be like water moving, right? And freezing water splashing or falling, you know? So I don't care the subject as long as it's in focus and you're freezing whatever motion it is. It could be a plane flying by, a bird flying by, you know, anything. I'll go over the camera settings in a second, but basically you want to make sure you're using the sports mode or a shutter priority mode. So on a Canon, that's called TV mode. On Nikons and Sonys, it's the S on the top dial. I would make sure your ISO is set to auto, so then it can basically increase the ISO to get to that shutter speed. And then make sure you're focusing on your subject. If you're using a DSLR or mirrorless camera, you want to set it to continuous autofocus. That is called AI servo or servo focus, which means it's constantly focusing. It's not focusing and stopping until you take a photo. The complex part of this is I want you guys to try to do some rule of thirds compositions. So rule of thirds composition, as I'm sure you know on your smartphone when you take photos, is it has that, it might be hard to see here, but it has that like thin little grid. So it's divided into thirds. So what I want you to try to do, whether you're shooting vertically or horizontally, is to basically line up your subject on the right third or the left third of the frame. So that way not everything's like dead center, right? And so if you're shooting horizontal, vertical, you're going to place, you know, whether it's a ball or a person, either on the right third or left third for 4 of your photos. You can shoot all 10 photos with rule of thirds. I just want you guys to try some different compositions, but minimum you're shooting 4 with rule of thirds. So right or left third of the frame. And then this one, you could edit your photos. I'm not requiring it for this one because it's kind of trickier to shoot it. It might take you some more time to shoot. But if you do adjust your photos, I will give some pointers and tips on Monday on how to either sharpen your subject or to bring out the details of your subject so they look sharper, and then some different adjustments. This is where 60 points is due next Tuesday, December 8th. So what I'm looking for is 40 points for the quality of your photos. Did you get your subjects in focus and you don't have motion blur? And then 20 points for either presenting and talking about it to the class. So like a 3-minute conversation about how you made your photos, or sometimes even 2 minutes. Or you could add descriptions. So if you do a Flickr album or a Google Doc or slide, you're putting descriptions on like the camera you use, the mode you try to shoot with. You shoot like a burst mode or a certain autofocus. Maybe use a certain app, which I'll show you. And then how you edited your photos, or maybe how you know, just the process of creating your photos. So there's lots of good links here. There also is the Google Doc as well that you can click on with all this information. I do have a couple terms here like shutter speed and frame rate, basically how long the camera is exposing the sensor. And then frame rate is basically, you know, when you shoot a burst of photos in a continuous shooting mode, how many frames per second it'll shoot. So lots of good info here, and then the same links here. So I did want to share some examples. So some ideas, or here's some good ones real quick. These are the best action photos of 2016. So Red Bull does a competition where they do kind of extreme sports photos. It's called the Red Bull Illume, ILLUME. And they do some pretty cool photos in the world of kind of action sports. So it's massive waves splashing. This is a diver, really, really tiny. Let's see if I can zoom in. There we go. So this is a big building cliff edge, and they're jumping off of it. Really good use of minimalism there. On a train, so it's going through Morocco. The Sahara Desert here with the surfboard. You can surf out there. Cool perspective inside the cab, and the BMX guys riding on the window. Cool photo of a abandoned building. I believe that's in Germany. Yeah. And so really cool isolation. They did a burst where they shot the, you know, inside the plane of the other plane, doing a barrel roll. This is a cliff, a climber on the edge of a cliff in South Africa. And some cool hiking. Just thought those are kind of cool action photos. So this video is a good video if you're trying to freeze action in natural light.
The old masters had secretive image projecting devices.
Different examples on how different shutter speeds work and how much motion blur you get.
Today we're going to show you how to freeze motion in camera.
I'm just going to skip ahead. So it goes through the settings on the camera, and then they start doing different shutter speeds. And you can start seeing when he does this little kick flip on the skateboard, how much motion blur. And so then they go through, and then they compare each of them. Come on, is it here? A little further. There we go. So you can see like 1/60th to 1/125th to 1/500th to 1/1000th, and then I believe they go up to 1/2000th. There you go. So it just gets motion blur, less motion, like super sharp the faster we make our shutter speed go. So pretty good little video if you want to watch it on shooting outdoors, which I would recommend. I would recommend doing this in daylight outdoors with more sunlight if you can. It makes it a lot easier to get a fast shutter speed.
Hey guys, welcome back. So in today's video, I'm going to be bringing you guys along on another behind-the-scenes look into one of my photo shoots. My friend Isabella, who is on her way over right now, is such a talented dancer.
So he likes to do a lot of cool dance photos where he's capturing a dancer in motion and then freezing that motion with a fast shutter speed. But you can get some pretty cool stuff with dancers doing cool movements and then being able to get them in focus and to freeze them. So that's kind of a cool video if you're interested in dance photography. That one's a good one to check out. Also some videos of how to, like the pro photographers shoot like the national championship game for college football, all the different ways to focus for action. In editing your photos, this last one is how to get a sharp and gritty look in Photoshop. That's a good one for editing for action. I'll be showing similar stuff on that on Monday. So examples, these are student photos from last year. So yes, they were on campus, but you can kind of see what they're doing. So again, we got the person freezing the other person as they jump. It looks like he's floating, you know, like Darth Vader style. Hair whips are cool, right? Motion, jumping, dancing, movement. They're throwing objects. So pretty good variety from this group of people. This one, she shot at home. So she showed herself jumping. She showed sand blowing off of her hand and just trying different ways of kind of throwing glitter and, you know, fine objects. So throwing it. Just keep in mind, glitter looks cool, but it is a pain to clean up, right? So she's trying different angles of sunlight outdoors, and then some of these rule thirds on the left third or the right third or left third here. So good examples of doing that at home. This one was shot at school, but just kind of good working with the friends, showing these action movements, and then using the fast shutter speed to freeze the action. Sometimes when you plan it out and then they do a thing, you know, you maybe are too close, so watch your edges. So take a practice photo, and then you can always, you know, reshoot it. Just like take some shots, look at it, and then check it. This person used a longer lens during class, and they shot the field hockey game. So she did some action photos of her friends playing field hockey. You know, you could set up outside at like a park, maybe have a friend in their gear, and you could record them, you know, playing their sports from a distance. So that's an option as well. All right, so for using a camera, that's what I'm going to go first. So if you guys were at school, you'd be using a camera like this. It's a Canon Rebel DSLR camera. And so how to set this up for shooting sports in action would be on the top dial. So you got the different modes on the top dial. Where's my camera? There we go. And so one looks like a little running dude. So that's our sports mode. So you just roll the dial to the guy that looks like he's running. And then on the back it says sports mode. And so what it does in the automatic sports mode is it puts my drive mode into high speed. So if I hold it down, it's going to shoot multiple frames really quick. So that way I can capture the perfect motion. It also puts the shutter speed around 500th or faster of a second. The problem is it goes down a little slower than 1/1000. So sometimes you get motion blur depending on what you're shooting. So that's why I don't recommend sports mode if I know how to work a camera more. So if I was doing this myself, I would go into the top dial. I'm just rotating it to where it says TV. That is my shutter priority mode. You can see shutter priority mode. Set your preferred shutter speed. And so what that lets you do, on the top of the camera, there's this little roller by the shutter speed where I can change the shutter. So there's my shutter where I focus and take photos, and then this is the roller for my shutter. So what I can do, let's see if I can turn this, here we go. You'll notice the shutter speed here, right? So it'll say 1/800. So I can go slower, oops, sorry, and then I can go faster. So what I would do, depending on how fast my subject is, I can go 1/2000th of a second, 1/2500th, 1/3200th, or 1/4000th. That's the fastest it'll go. That'll freeze pretty fast stuff. The other thing I want to set is my drive mode. So on the back of the camera, there's this little, looks like multiple frames right here. If I press that, it lets me choose my drive mode. So I have the high speed continuous, low speed continuous, and then different timers or one shot. So I would put it on the high speed continuous. So again, it gets you that fast frame rate. So if I hold it down, it shoots multiple frames real quick. And then the last thing I want to do is press this little AF button here. And what that lets you choose is your autofocus mode. So one shot will basically focus once, wait until you take the photo, and then it'll start focusing again. AI focuses Canon is basically like it'll pick for you if it's continuous or single shot. I would just stick it on AI servo. It's also known as continuous focusing on the Sonys and Nikons, or servo focusing. So that's the one you want. And what that does is basically whenever I press the shutter halfway to focus, it's going to keep focusing as I shoot. So if I was tracking a soccer player, they're moving around, and while I take photos, I don't want it to wait to take the photo and then start focusing again. It just wants to keep focusing and tracking my subject. So that's the benefit of the servo focus. And so then, obviously I can, zoom my lens in and out. I can make sure it's set to autofocus on the lens. It should say AF, right? Not MF for manual focus, AF for autofocus. And that's how I'd set up my camera. So if you have a specific camera, just let me know what you're trying to shoot with. And, I can help you out. It is pretty similar to the Nikons and Sonys. The shutter priority mode is basically just ask for shutter. And then you just set your ISO. Oh, right. Last one. Sorry to tell you. The ISO. So some cameras are different. It says ISO here. I'm just going to press that, and it'll let me set it to an ISO. So some cameras have an auto mode, or it can manually select. Basically, what this does is it creates the sensitivity to shoot that fast speed of shutter, because a fast shutter doesn't let in a lot of light. So you need to increase the sensitivity on the sensor so it can get to that shutter speed and it's bright enough. So just press the ISO. I would set it if you have an auto mode. So then the camera will figure out, okay, you need this 1/4000 shutter speed. I need to increase the ISO to this amount to get to that brightness for that shutter speed. So that's for the camera. With the iPhone, so my iPhone here, there's a couple things you want to do for shooting with your iPhone. So I'll be putting some links in on how to do this, but I'll show you in class. So I'm just going to go into my settings. I'm going to go down to my camera in the settings. So just click on settings and then click on camera. And so what you want to do whenever I set up an iPhone is first make sure your formats are set to the most compatible. That's our JPEG. The high efficiency is good for low resolution, like taking up less memory, but it is an HEIC format and you can't open it in much programs. It's mostly just Mac programs. You can't upload them to Flickr. You can't put them on Google Docs. So make sure you put it the most compatible in your formats. And then what I want to do is where it says use volume up for burst, make sure that is turned on. It is usually turned off, so just make sure it's green. And what that lets you do is it lets you take a burst with the volume. Because of the new iOS 14, when you did a burst photo, you could just press the shutter, hold it down, and it did a burst. But now, if you press and hold, it starts taking a video. And so instead of shooting a burst of photos, it shoots a short video. So that's kind of annoying for if you want to shoot bursts. So now what you can do is do the volume up button, which is the top one, and then it'll take multiple photos. So you can see it shot 12 photos real quick, and then I just go like really bad, but it'll say burst photos, 10 photos. You just hit select at the bottom, and then you can go through those burst photos and see which one you want to use, and then you just select the ones you want, and then just save the ones you want. So that's kind of how I'd approach it if I was just using the standard camera app. So keep in mind, if I'm shooting this in the daylight, it should be bright and really fast shutter speeds, not a problem. If I shoot this when the sun's going down or indoors, it's not as bright. And so if I'm just shooting with the standard camera app, you might get some motion blur. So how do I avoid that? Is a pay option. So the ProCam app, it's the one in the middle right there. This one is a good investment. It lets you save in better formats than you're normally used to. It can save in RAW format or untipped format, which is basically much more high resolution. It's getting the most out of your smartphone pictures, which is nice. It also lets you do, so it has like different modes that you can show at the bottom. You'll see it has a burst mode. So when I put it into burst mode, when I press the shutter and hold it down, you can see it says 8 photos real quick. It starts bursting photos. So I can use that button like I used to be able to on the iPhone, on the old iOS. The other benefit is you can change the shutter speed. So the cool thing about the ProCam is where it says the second, so right there it says like 1/82nd second. That's super slow. But what I can do is when that's selected is I can increase the shutter speed. So I can go up to 1/4000th of a second on a smartphone and control the shutter speed. What I would do then is adjust the ISO to make it bright enough. There we go. So basically, I select the second right here to change the shutter speed, and then the ISO, I can move that up to get to the right brightness. So the ProCam app gives you a lot more control over the camera on a smartphone. It's not guessing the shutter speed for you. You're controlling the shutter speed and you're controlling the ISO, and it makes it much more, you have a lot more control instead of the camera guessing, which it will guess wrong quite a lot. So those are kind of the options I would do if I was doing a smartphone. Is the ProCam app would be the best step for if you're using a smartphone. Otherwise, you can do the burst mode. Just make sure you're shooting in bright sunlight, okay? I wouldn't wait till the evening to do this project. All right, so I'm just gonna stop the recording.